Hey everybody, this is Scott Dickerson. I'm going to wait probably until about 5 after the hour to kick off the meeting. And I'm assuming you're in the share. Can you guys see my screen that I'm sharing, I hope?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for speaking up.
Hi, Scott. This is Byron Todd.
Hey everybody, it's Scott Dickerson. I'm just going to check the chat, see how we're doing here on people. And just for our own sanity, I'm going to put everybody on mute. To go off mute, let me put this in the little presentation thing. You'll just do a #6. I think I had this kind of fancy voting on, polling on questions idea, and if we get a ton of people, we may still continue to do that, but we'll probably just be able to take questions over the phone line. So #6 to unmute as soon as I mute everybody.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay, so I'm unmuted, allegedly. Can you guys give me like a type into the text chat or a hand raise if you can hear my voice for you, Ivy? Okay, awesome, thanks. All right, great. Well, we're going to wait just a couple more minutes, maybe just one more minute to give people a chance to join. We've got some IBMers online, so another quick question. Let me lower everybody's hand. I had posted something into the text chat at the very beginning of the meeting for those before anybody joined. Can anybody see that in their own text chat if they go to the text chat icon under chat messages? Do you see the full history of what I've typed? Can you raise your hand if you do? Yeah. That's what I thought. I don't think you see any messages. Okay. Yeah, I didn't think so. All right. So that's good, actually. So for those IBMers who are comfortable introducing themselves into the text chat, so everybody who's on the call, thanks for joining. We're going to be talking about Application Designer today. I'm going to start at a really high level very briefly, just in case people are not familiar with Application Designer, and then talk about the different ways of using Application Designer to configure the applications and give you guys some tips and tricks and best practices that we have come up with in-house, things to consider before you make those changes to your Maximo applications. But I don't have much to talk about today, and really I'm more interested in questions and introducing ourselves, of course, as experts, giving you ways to contact us and communicate with us, and then seeing what kind of questions you guys have. So the first thing is I am Scott Dickerson. I am the designer for the Maximo Asset Management User Interface Framework, which includes Application Designer and Start Center, but also the way that the UI framework interprets all those applications and the capabilities that it has to render the user interface for your users. And I'm relatively new, about 8 months, 7 months. I was previously the chief programmer for the Smart Cloud Control Desk. I'm going to paste in my name and email address and bio into the text chat. Feel free to contact me if you guys have questions, design things, but a more formal way of contacting me for design enhancement requests to the product is through our RFE mechanism at IBM. RFE stands for Request for Enhancement. So there's a website you can go to file your request, and I will see it for sure and be able to, along with product management, respond to it. Sometimes we'll send them back to ask for more information about what you're trying to get. And one of the benefits of asking for new features in that way rather than just sending me an email directly is that everyone out there in the world can see your request, and they actually can vote on your request, and we watch those votes very carefully in-house to see which requests are getting the most votes, obviously, to help us prioritize what to work on in future releases. And a couple more kind of things just to get out of the way up front. So any IBMers that feel comfortable introducing themselves, there's a fair amount of IBMers on the call. If you're comfortable introducing yourself, please do post your name and a bio in the text chat. And honestly, anyone else who wants to introduce themselves or you want to make yourself available to other teams, you're welcome to do that. But this is an open session, so please no confidential information in the text chat or in the moderator, Google moderator questions. I will not be sharing any confidential information, which means, unfortunately, I can't talk about anything that's currently under development, or I can't talk about like release plans and timelines and things like that. What we can talk about is the current state of the art, whether a capability is there or not, and if it's not there, what you're trying to do, what you need, so I can understand what exactly why you're trying to do what you're trying to do, and what the use case is, so we can really well document it. So that we can talk about. I just can't talk about plans. I would like to kind of keep the text chat free of questions, which is kind of unusual. I want to try out this new Google technology, and I kind of want to save the text chat for our introductions to each other and for our links. So because I don't have a great way of sharing a presentation with you, I'm going to just post some links into the text chat at the end of the call to our RFE tool, to our blogs, and to our forums, and to our wikis. So let's go over to that moderator session if you've got questions that you want to post during the call, if you want to post while I'm talking during my initial presentation. I expect there'll be a fair amount of time, probably half the meeting, for us to actually answer questions in detail. And as long as there's only about 50 of us, I think we can just take them over the phone probably. So you'll probably just be able to unmute your line and ask directly over the phone. So, all right. That's all out of the way. Let's start talking. Application Designer 101. Just in case we have people in here who are not familiar with Application Designer, I want to give you the 5-second high-level overview of Application Designer. Application Designer, as most of you know, is a way inside the system for both Maximo Asset Management products and Smart Cloud Control Desk products to allow system administrators. I prefer to call you guys developers. I'm actually kind of interested in what you call yourselves from a persona perspective. But for developers to change the way the Maximo Asset Management product UIs look and operate. So basically everything within our platform, every application is configurable, and Application Designer is the tool in the platform that allows you, with a drag-and-drop interface, to be able to configure the application to your needs. And we'll talk about, in a very short time, we'll talk about the different use cases that we see, that we think we know that people are doing out in the field, ways that they are configuring their applications, and we'll talk about best practice recommendations from our development team about what you should think about when you're making those decisions about how to configure the applications. And this document that I'm going to review with you has just been posted to our wiki yesterday, and I will be posting a new blog post to kind of share it more widely with the team, just to let people know that it's out there. But actually, I'm interested in getting your feedback on the document, because we can sort of pretend like we know how you configure our applications, and we think we know, and we feel like we have best practices recommendations, but I'm really interested to get your feedback on whether you think we're being realistic with our recommendations. And so now's your chance, and we can make this hopefully a better set of best practice recommendations together. So this is the application designer. Just in case I didn't make it clear, you can drag and drop new controls onto a given application. You can remove controls from an existing application. And basically, you can just configure that application to look sort of exactly like, not exactly like, but more similar to what your users are expecting. So that's the application designer 101. I think it's time now for us to talk about kind of our best practices and the use cases where we see people are actually using the way we think our customers are using application designer to configure our product. So the first set of use cases are to simplify existing applications. I think that we feel like as part of an initial onboarding of our product, one of the first things that people do for their end users is examine the applications that we ship and decide that a lot of the information that we ship out of the box you don't need in your business. So they want, and you want to focus your end users on just the stuff that they need. So the first step we think you guys do is to kind of reposition or remove fields. Maybe you'll position a field of the application on the main screen of the application most frequently, or remove a section that you're not interested in. So it's very easy to do that in Application Designer. I'm not going to show how to do it. I'm sure you guys all know how to do that. But one thing we've realized over time is a good best practice for this is not to just delete the section or tab entirely. You can do that in the existing application, but a best practice is to hide the section or tab with the signature option. Signature options allow you to hide or show areas of an application based on a security model to allow you one of the initial use cases of it was to allow you to have one set of users get one set of views of an application and another group of users or role of users get a different view of that application. But one reason to do this way for small changes to your application is that whenever future versions of this application come out from IBM and we release new versions of the application, our upgrade process is actually going to change that application under the covers. So let's say there was a section of that application called dates, all right, and we add 6 new dates to the application. Well, if you remove the date section entirely from that application, you won't get any of our upgraded fields. They'll go into the wrong place, basically. So whenever our merge happens and we try to add these new fields, we won't have a date section to add them to. And so usually what happens is they'll just kind of be added to this random place in your UI, and then you'll have to kind of manually remediate that. So if you just hide the section or tab, that date field, the new date field that we might add, can get added to that hidden section together and kind of kept together. And it just kind of helps with your upgrade process. So that recommendation is targeted towards what we call container widgets, like sections and tabs and tables, for instance. And it just helps you. Yep.
In the chat and in myself, we're not seeing anything you're presenting. Appears your screen is frozen on just the best practices application. We're not seeing anything else.
That's all. Best practices for. That's all I'm showing is just that document.
Okay. Some people aren't even seeing that, I guess.
Okay. Maybe it's just only seeing blue on the screen. Okay. Yeah, that I don't know about. Thanks for feel free to kind of ask questions over the chat. Let me go back and just make sure that technology's working. So hands up if you guys can see my current share now. Okay, so at least I'm still going. Yeah, I'm just showing the doc. And one of the reasons I'm showing the doc is we have some very specific recommendations that I want you guys to actually see and read. And if you disagree with, speak up, basically. So anyway, this is for kind of relatively simple changes that you make to the application, and something to consider. Now, when you do hide these sections with a SIG option, it will have some performance implications. So you have to kind of balance. This is one of the really tough questions to answer when you're changing these applications. Do I want to modify the existing application, or do I want to clone this application, make a copy of it, and start from scratch, basically? So, and then clone this existing application, and then modify this copy, and go there. That's kind of the initial application configuration question that everyone struggles with. And you could do either, of course. Like, the tool doesn't stop you from either. So what we're recommending is, for small changes to the out-of-the-box applications, just make that change directly in the application itself to reposition or remove the fields. And by small, I guess I mean if they're discrete changes, if there's whole sections of the application that you can just hide, if there's a couple of fields that you can just remove, or a couple of fields that you can just move, we would probably recommend just sticking with the existing application, basically, and not going to a clone. One of the reasons that you may consider going to the clone approach is you never want any of our upgrade changes. That is a valid decision. You can decide, you know what, this version that we're building, it's locked in stone. We're not going to make any major changes, and we're not interested in any of the additional features that your product may add to this application. You can decide that, and then you can clone the application and just make your own copy of the application, and just keep that version of the application. But you need to think about some of the possible maintenance costs of cloning that application before you do that, and that's what I want to talk about next. So let's say that you have a use case from your end users where, let me try to think of a good one. Let's say in the change application, which is one of our applications that people commonly modify. Let's say in the change application that they decide that the majority of the subtabs of the change application they're not interested in, and you have they have 20 new fields that are not tracked anywhere else, and a whole bunch of other things that you want to add to that application that it doesn't currently have support for, and they want a very different look and feel. They want something that emulates some change application that they had in some previous product. So you really have to move stuff around a lot, and it's really going to greatly change the UI. First off, my condolences to you, because anytime your end users are starting with a user interface that they've previously used in mind that you're trying to replicate inside Maximo and Smart Cloud Control Desk, it can be very challenging. And to be honest with you, it can kind of be setting yourself up for failure, because nothing can be perfectly replicated in a totally different tool. But let's say that this is your admittedly difficult task. In that case, you probably will choose to clone the original change application and start making changes to that cloned application. But before you do that, you really need to know that all the additional maintenance costs of maintaining that separate application. And it's fine. You can certainly do it, but you need to just keep this in mind. So the first one is obvious. So let's say that now the Smart Cloud Control Desk team has added 6 new fields to their change application that you really want that come out in the next release, well, you're going to have to manually migrate those fields over to your cloned version of the application. So that's number one. Let's say that the Smart Cloud Control Desk team adds 2 new dialogues to the change application that are launched from the menu bar, from the select action menu. Okay. Well, you not only have to clone those dialogues to the new cloned change application, you also have to clone all of the metadata around those dialogues, the menu entries, the new SIG options to launch those menu entries, and the application permissions. I'm watching the questions come in, by the way, so the good questions. You guys on the side keep posting questions to the Google and keep voting on them as well. So any of that metadata that gets added to the change application, you're going to have to manually merge over as well. And that's fine. Sometimes you're not interested in those new features, but you just need to kind of think about that when you're making your initial decision. Are we happy with kind of the way it is and we're not interested in some of the future upgrades, or do we want to kind of be tied to those upgrades and allowed to sort of automatically inherit those upgrades? So as much as possible, we would recommend sticking to the out-of-the-box applications, obviously, for reduced maintenance cost and things like that. But we, of course, realize that you have customer requirements, you have your end-user requirements, that sometimes you just have to take the plunge, clone the application, and go. And you just need to be kind of prepared with your release planning to keep those 2 applications in sync going forward, basically. I don't talk. Surprisingly, I don't talk about this in this document, but I want to point this out really quick before I move on. As part of our upgrade process, there's this new capability where before we start touching any of the applications, we do an instant backup of those applications to the file system of the admin client. So if you have like a new version of Maximo Asset Manager or Smart Cloud Control Desk, before we ever start changing the application presentations, we take a snapshot of what you have in your environment. And we did that intentionally because sometimes at the end of the upgrade process, excuse me, sometimes at the end of the upgrade process, whenever the upgrade tool is put in one of these situations where it doesn't have anywhere to put a field, for instance, so it kind of puts it in a strange place or whatever, you might end up with something that you don't like. So we just wanted to take a snapshot of what your application looked like before we made any changes to it, basically. So that is there on the file system. And by the way, when I say upgrade process, I'm talking about the upgrade from like 7x to 7x, not from 6x to 7x. I think the new feature is only kind of fired up whenever you're going from like 7.1 to 7.5, for instance, or 7.2 to 7.5, depending on which product you have. So if you look at your upgrade guide, it'll talk about that feature a little. You'll be able to find reference to that feature. But I just wanted you guys to know that that feature was there. Okay. So finally, so I also tried to write this document in order of most complicated, or least complicated, to most complicated. So finally, what we deem the most complicated, to conditionally modify the fields of an application based on the state of the record. So this is the Conditional UI topic. I think a lot of you know about Conditional UI and have questions about it already. Conditional UI is very powerful, but it's a power that must be wielded wisely. So you can what I think we found out in the field, the best usage of conditional UI is really as a mechanism to help your end users process the data in an application through progressive disclosure or through progressive highlighting or things like that. And let me explain what I mean by that. So let's say that some of our applications inside Maximo and Smart Click Control are kind of overwhelming because they have to solve sort of every problem, right, for a wide variety of roles. So a very common operation we see is for potentially different stages of a record to show or hide different sections or fields of that record based on the stages of that record. So if a work order is in a certain state, highlight certain fields of that work order. Or if a work order is in a certain state, hide tabs of that work order because they're not important for the current state of the work order. And we find that is very valuable to those end users. They're focused on just what they care about. They're focused on, it makes them faster. It makes them able to do their day-to-day job faster. So that's what conditional UI is for. Also, a lot of times, highlighting, you can change the color of a field if there's certain information that you really want to pop to your end users, like very common use cases. If a ticket is a high priority, you make it glow, bright orange, basically. So that's another really useful use of conditional UI. However, there are a lot of people that use conditional UI in ways that we wouldn't necessarily recommend, and we want to kind of point that out here. A lot of people use conditional UI to make fields required at different aspects of the process. And I understand why that was done initially, probably because there wasn't an easy to configure alternative to that. However, there's a lot of reasons why that's non-optimal. One is that it only works in that application, and you have to mirror that kind of business decision in every application that may touch that business object, which is kind of a lot of work for records that show up in a lot of applications and dialogues and things. And if there's any interface that accesses those records through outside of the UI, like your integration framework, for instance, or any other code in the system that accesses it, none of those requirements would get enforced. None of those required fields would get enforced, basically. We have seen customers use workflow engines historically in previous versions of Maximo to enforce that certain fields of records are required at different stages of that record. And that actually was good. That at least makes sense, but of course that has the problem of making you have to be within a workflow to get that validation to fire. It also has the problem of not communicating very well which fields got validated or need to be validated, unlike the UI validation that happens now. So what we recommend now is automation scripting to sort of set and enforce that business logic. And if you think about it, it's not that different from the way we recommend to use automation scripting. When I say now, I mean 7.5. It's not that different from the way we recommend you using automation scripting that's another good question. It's not the way that we recommend, not that different from the way we recommend using automation scripting to validate other aspects of the field, like, hey, did you type in the right kinds of values for that field? Automation scripting does that job. Hey, did you, are you the right, I'm trying to think of other kinds of common validation rules that we recommend using automation scripting for. I'm sure you guys can think of a million. But that a particular field of an object is required at a particular time is a perfect example of validation. So, so that is I just want to point out that that is one of the many reasons why automation scripting does a much better job of making things required than conditional UI, basically. And one of the reasons we're so fussy about conditional UI and why you have to be careful with it is because it's relatively performance expensive. So if you think about, unlike the SIG option thing, so you know how in the previous example we talked about hiding and showing things with SIG options? That happens just one time, so it doesn't happen on a per field basis. But whenever you start setting conditional UI on a per field basis, those expressions that run in the background get executed every time any field value changes by an end user. So if you think about it, let's say that you set one conditional UI field, one conditional user expression on one field of the change application, okay? And that thing has 20 fields. If it takes a half second to run that query to check the logic, every time they go from field to field to field to field, it's going to add sort of 10 seconds of CPU calculation to that form. So that is, I mean, that just is a good example of why you have to be careful with your conditional UI. You don't want to have too much conditional UI in the user interface, and you want to make sure that it's super, super fast. Now, to be fair, if you're smart, most conditional UI can be really fast. And the key to making that conditional UI really fast is to just make sure that you're not running SQL, basically. So if you're smart when you write your conditional UI, you can write that conditional UI against a direct attribute of the object that you're on. And that's probably the most common scenario, like, hey, if the ticket is in this state, then blah. If the work order is in this state, then blah. As long as you do that, it's super fast because it runs in memory. Anytime you get yourself in trouble is if you say things like, if this other table that's related to the current change has 5 records in it, then blah. If your condition starts to look like that, where it has to run against the database, you may be in trouble. You may not be. You may have a really well-tuned database and a really well-tuned query, but you really need to kind of think about those use cases, basically. Okay. Now, so conditional UI, I was going to talk about one other thing while I was here, and I really want to blow through this as quick as possible so we can get to your questions. I'm talking a little bit more than I expected. Most common question we have about conditional UI actually was the #1 request for enhancement for a while based on votes was, why aren't the conditional UI values that we can use for widgets more well documented? That was a perfectly valid request. You guys are absolutely right. There was a document out there that actually did a pretty good job of saying, look, for text boxes, these are the different properties that you can set that conditional UI can change. And these are the valid values to set for those widgets. It was out there, believe it or not. And I had a link to it ready to go. In fact, the link is right here in the document. Unfortunately, that document is gone. We found out yesterday. I don't know where it went. It was hosted on the IBM website. It just disappeared. So I'm in process of sort of rewriting that document. It's going to be called Valid Values for the Conditional UI. And it's going to go through each of the widgets and give you guys a list of all of the things that conditional UI can change and the name of the property that you can set and then the valid values for that property. And I would hoped I could get it finished before this meeting, but I couldn't. There's just too many widgets. But I will be publishing this to the Best Practices Wiki, and I'll be sharing that link at the end of the call into the text chat. So you guys will have this sort of final, what can I change through conditional UI and how can I change it for each widget soon. So by the way, there are forum posts about the most common conditional UI changes that need to be made. and like changing the color of a field, for instance, or hiding or showing a field. Hiding or showing a field, I would argue, are potentially not conditional UI. A lot of times you can just do it with SIG options and security groups. But anyway, so you can find some of this stuff out on the forums now, but I'm trying to put together kind of a master doc for you guys. One other very common question, and I might as well just get it out and just get it answered. Can I disable buttons using conditional UI? No, you cannot. So it is not possible right now. You can hide them, but you cannot easily disable a button using conditional UI. Now, if you set a whole section or a tab to read only and it contains some buttons, some of the buttons will disable, but some of them won't. So just that is kind of a known limitation out there. So, and I'll actually probably talk about that explicitly in this document because it comes up so frequently. By the way, if you guys have common conditional UI questions, there's a couple in the chat already, not in the chat, but over in the moderator session. Please post those, and we'll see. We'll see if any of them kind of bump up to the top of the list here. There might not be enough. I might be able to get to all these questions, actually. It's only 13 so far. Okay. So I'm going to keep going through this best practice document a little quicker now because we're starting to get to more complicated scenarios, and you're really going to have to go through these tutorials to do it. So the next set of kind of operations are not just that you need to hide things, but you need to add new fields to the application. So the first is to add new fields to the application that already exist in the Mabo or in related Mabos. And we have some best practices there. One common best practice that I want to point out right now is a lot of people modify the list tab of applications where we show records. I understand why you do that, because you want your end users to be able to download lists and get, Excel versions of things. But you have to be very careful about what you put in the list tab from a performance perspective. You should know if you ever put a related object into the list tab like this. So let's say that I try to pull in an attribute from a related object in the list tab. It can cause an additional database query to fire for every record that's shown. So it can really, really have negative performance impacts on your system if it's a slow query. So you just have to be very careful in adding fields to list tabs. Within an application, it's not as bad. It's just when you're within tables, you really have to be careful what you're showing, basically. So adding existing fields to an application, obviously, you might need to do. Adding existing related information to an application, you might need to do. And this is sort of like not just a field, but a table or a dialog, and there's some wiki entries on how to do that. And then finally, you might have to add a totally new field to an application. So this document points to a couple examples of how to do that, both how to add a new primitive field, which is relatively simple, like adding a new field that's just like a new text string or a new number or something into the current ticket. And then second, to add a field that points to a different object, which is a little more complicated to do. Finally, you might need to add a new relationship between two existing objects. So like a very common use case is for work orders, you have maybe a set of supervisors instead of an individual supervisor. So you might want to relate the change work order to a set of people in a new relationship that currently doesn't exist. You're going to need to build a new mapping table. It's a little bit hard, not impossible. No code theoretically is required to do that. And I have Bruno Porto Uri, I think how he says his name, has a really good blog post about how to do that you'll get a link to from this best practice doc. And then finally, and again, my condolences if you have to do this, you might have to create an entirely new application from scratch to capture business information. It is possible without code to do this. you probably will have to write some automation script to decide what your business logic is going to be, though. And you might have to write some Java code to decide what your business logic is going to be. We have a couple of examples on how to do this. One of the things we're interested in, the thing that actually I'm the most interested in about this is what kinds of new applications are you guys having to write? In fact, if you guys have written new applications from scratch out in your environment, I'd love for you to post that into the text chat with a brief kind of synopsis of what that application was for. So I'd be interested to see what kinds of use cases you guys had, because we don't want to dissuade you from writing new applications. It's exciting that we're on top of a platform where you can build entirely new applications. Here in-house, we build new applications for our own internal purposes on top of our platform. So we feel like it's a good platform. I'm just curious for the kinds of use cases you guys use our platform to build these new applications for. So if you could post that in the text chat, that would be great. I'm going to save the text chat at the end of the call. And that's about it from kind of the best practice document. That should give us fodder to talk about in the meeting. Before I stop talking, before I stop pitching, I guess, I just want to remind you of all the communication channels we have. I'm going to post links to all these communication channels into the text chat. I'm going to post, so the wiki is where these best practice documents are posted. I'm going to post that link into the text chat. There's a separate wiki for Smart Cloud Control Desk and Maximo Asset Management, but our user interface configuration information is shared to both. So you'll get, whichever one you go to, you'll get this information. There's a process automation forum. I hope you guys know about it. We IBMers lurk out there and answer questions a lot, but it's kind of amazing to me how many Maximo and Smart Cloud Control Desk developers there are out there, and a lot of times they answer the question before we even see it. So it's impressive actually the amount of people that are using our platform out there and the amount of expertise that are out there on how to configure it. So I definitely recommend going there. If you don't, I go every day to go check out, see what's happening. Follow blogs. Probably you know about that because that's how you heard of this meeting. And then enhancement requests, like I said, I'm going to put a link to that tool. If you know that this is not in the product, please do open that request for enhancement in the RFE tool. You might want to search on the existing RFEs before you open your own because somebody else might have already opened it. And if they have, you should vote it up. It'll help to vote that RFE up, and it just helps us prioritize our work. And then finally, of course, PMRs. You know, if all else fails, PMR. Or if it seems like a bug, of course, just PMR process. I'm sure you guys know about that. Okay, so that's all I had to kind of share. Would I demo any specifics? Okay. Well, I don't have any kind of specifics set up for a demo, but I can maybe talk to that use case and kind of share it. So first thing I'm going to do is go over to the little Google moderator question. Thanks for playing along with my idea to try out this technology. I want to see what it was like. The top voted question is, can you touch on one might hook a custom Java applet into an app designer from the president? Yeah. First off, to be honest with you, Joe, I would say as much as possible stay away from Java applets. We have had a tremendous amount of pain based on what Java has been doing to their client-side plugin. But this is obviously a long conversation that maybe would require a blog post to talk about it. There is a recent blog post that basically talks about how to develop a custom control. And that custom control, how to develop a custom control, plug it into one of the apps that you design in App Designer. The custom control is a Dojo-based control, which, by the way, guys, I highly recommend those Dojo controls. That blog post is in the process it's in the process automation blog. I'm going to put a link to that blog. It just came in a couple weeks ago, and I'll make sure I put that into the text chat. What you end up doing, Joe, at the highest level, basically, is you declare this new control as a new tag that the Maximo framework knows how to process in our control and our component registries file. And then you either write code on the back end you write some JSP, basically, to kind of render that control, and then you write some code on the back end to sort of populate that control with data. When we built Java applets in Smart Cloud Control Desk, our JSP basically spit out all the tags to render the applet into the Maximo presentation. And then the applet woke up and got access to the back-end control. And actually, we have a servlet that's listening for that applet request that we had to plug into the WebXML and respond to that applet request with this kind of model object that we needed to send back across to the applet so it could render things. So it kind of required for the applet to kind of communicate back in to the Maximo server side. It kind of required like an additional layer on top of our normal control and component registry model that's documented. So again, I wouldn't recommend it, to be honest with you. I would recommend kind of the link I'm going to send into the chat that Rick Gephardt wrote about how he added a Dojo widget into our Maximo framework from scratch, and it's very good, and I would start from that. Okay, so there's that one. Bowser, I think this is Jason, asked, are there plans to decouple conditional UI from security? Like I said, plans I can't say, but I totally understand this use case. So you don't want to actually link the hiding or showing of a field to a security group. If you use conditional UI, you know that it has to tie to a SIG option and to a security group. And for that use case, you're right. We don't need we do now, but from your perspective, we shouldn't need security SIG options to make that decision. It should be valid for everybody. So this does make sense. Jason, I know I asked you to put in an RFE. If you have put in a specific RFE on this, if you want to paste that into the text chat, that link to that RFE, then people could go vote on it after this call and help us prioritize this requirement. For now, you have to attach it to a SIG option and to a security group. Is there a knowledge-based doc on the best practice to duplicate a select action function into a button? There is not. And I'm not super familiar with the inventory app. As far as I know anyway, there's not a knowledge-based doc or a wiki doc on it. It's not too hard at the highest level, I think. A lot of times all you have to do is fire the same event that the menu entry fires from the button to get the dialog to pop. It kind of depends on what the back-end event receiver is how it's coded, to whether that'll work or not. But I'll take this as kind of a recommendation for. I think this is a good idea, by the way. So this from a usability perspective, I think it's a win to move common operations down from the select action menu into an inform button or an inform icon or inform, inline field on the main inventory tab. I agree. I think, let's streamline your end user's operations. So I think this is a good request for probably a future article, and you can post this to the forum, by the way, and I can respond in the short term, and I can probably respond out there through the process automation forum if somebody else doesn't get to it first on this specific example, but I think this is a good recommendation for a generic, wiki post and probably a blog post to point to it. Okay, next question. Any plans to allow for more deliberate positioning with place controls on canvas? That's, plan perspective, who knows. We hear this use case a lot, and Maximo, I believe, used to allow the deliberate positioning, and we moved away from it because it was too hard to really make intelligent decisions on upgrades. So we don't see it. We sort of see this path that we've gone down of using the section and column layout positioning to be the path that we're sticking with. Now, that being said, in our new skin, in the Smart Cloud Control Desk skin, you guys know that a lot of the white space has been reduced, and there are capabilities to reduce the width of table columns and certain like list boxes and things. And so those things can help a little bit with positioning, but other than using the section, column, and row and the width, that's our kind of current stand on positioning, basically. From performance standpoint, is it better to make field required via App Designer or data restrictions, security groups? Well, as I mentioned, I wouldn't make the field required via App Designer just due to kind of object sanity. From a kind of one versus the other thing, I think that the security groups is going to be more efficient because it doesn't have to reevaluate per field, but I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not 100% sure. So I know we've got some performance gurus from IBM on the call. If you want to respond to this, this would be a place where I probably need some help. And if we don't get a response, I can probably look into this and come back. I want to know if Maximo has some kind of multi-value list, like a radio button list, but made with checkboxes. No, not really. You just kind of can position the checkboxes on top of each other. So, it's sort of like that, but it's not exactly what you want. How does automation scripting relate to App Designer? Automation scripting is it's a business object logic. It's sort of a way to create business object logic without requiring you to write Java classes and set up a compiling environment. So you can do it with like Python scripting or other scripting. So think of automation scripting as if hopefully as developers, separation of concerns between like the web layer and the business object layer. Automation scripting is for the business objects and App Designer is for the web layer. Just think of it like that. That's the way to think about it. I will send a link out to the docs, and then I think we're through the kind of main questions here. Let me go check the text chat to see what kind of things are going on over in the text chat, see if I missed anything. Okay, great. So this is a lot of the okay. I like some of these answers are based on I'm just going down the list. LD field to multi-line text box. I'm not sure that you can add an LD field to a multi-line text box. I don't use multi-line text boxes that much, I confess. and then everybody's talking about. Oh, thanks. Charlotte posted a link to the best practices document that I'm going through on our wiki, on our MAM wiki. Thanks, Charlotte, for that. Yeah. So we're basically out of time, but I've really enjoyed the session and the questions. One of the things, so I got some really good ideas for future blog posts. Let me post those links right now before I lose you guys. We can stick around a little bit at the end of the chat too to finish this out. So here's the Process Automation Forum, and here's, in case you've never been, here's the link to take you directly to the Process Automation Forum. Okay. Here is the Maximo Asset Management blog. If you're a Smart Cloud person, you might not have known about it, so here it is. I would recommend you sign up to follow that blog. That's where we share all our information with you. Here's our Smart Cloud Control Desk blog, where I don't know why we have two separate blogs for the two separate products, but we do. Here's our Best Practices Wiki. Here's the Maximo Best Practices Wiki, that is. And here is a set of recent blog posts on configuring the user interface that I have written or others have written. Okay, there's that guy. Here's that guy. It's a strange way to do this, right? But we're being experimental today, so. Oh, thanks, Roy. Dojo post, yeah. I'm going to make sure that I get I don't think it was, but I'm going to make sure I go get it and put it in here. And here's another one. You can usually tell what they're about from clicking here. Let me go find Rick's blog post. See how good Google is. Dojo. Isn't it called Process Automation? Yeah. Blog view, Process Automation. Yeah, so Dojo is IBM's strategic direction from a widget technology. We like it. It's good technology. It's got a lot of nice widgets out there already, kind of pre-canned, and that's what Richard focused his blog. Our blogs have been pretty slow the past couple of days. I don't know what's going on. That's what Richard's document gives as an example, and internally that's what we're doing as well. So that's what we're looking at, so that's definitely what we recommend. Here's one more I find very useful blog. This is Bruno's blog. If you do have to get into the programming side of things, he does a really good job documenting that stuff. Well, hopefully I can get that link to Richard's post here. I think I know an alternate way to go get it. Stop sharing for just a second in case there's something. Oh, I've already stopped sharing? No? Sorry, guys, I'm almost here. Hey, while I'm doing this, please go into the Google Moderator session and post ideas for future Meet the Experts topics and vote them up. So any other thing you want to know, not limited to the UI, any Maximo Smart Cloud Control Desk question topic that you want to have as a future session, please go into the Google Moderator session and post it, and then please everybody go over there and vote on it, and it'll help us kind of prioritize these future Meet the Expert sessions. All right, let me see if I can get that link for you. for the control. I think I got it. Yep. Okay, so this is the link that I mentioned that gives you details on how to write your own control. It's the one I just posted into the text chat. And it's really good. Let me go look and see if we have any other new future topics that came in. No future topics. Well, you guys have my email from the text chat. Be sure to copy that text chat out before you leave. And if you have future topics, future suggestions for things that you guys want to meet the expert sessions on, please do give me a ping, send me an email, or and let us know. And we'll be happy to set them up for you. And thanks for taking the time to join. Thanks for taking the time to listen. And thanks for being active users of our product. We really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to making it better for you and giving you guys all the information that you need to do your job. I'm going to stick around for a couple minutes if anybody has any other questions that they weren't able to get in or any other detailed things they want to talk through. I'll be here. Just *6 to unmute.